case it's been hard for anyone to figure out, I am not a popular content creator. I don't have that many supporters, that many views usually. But be that as it may, I try with a genuine desire to have consistency. When I tell you that Saturday and Monday I stream at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to 12, I try to keep that in place. I really do. And when it doesn't happen, 9 times out of 10, there's some unforeseen circumstance that causes that to happen, which was the case today. I had virtually no way of predicting that I was going to be involved with something like that, and it would happen during the day, which also makes it to where it's very difficult to just mitigate it because if it happens in the morning, right around the time I'm about to start streaming, and I'm only finding out about it that morning, it's kind of hard to navigate it. Now, in the past, I've done this thing where I've played, I guess, the early bird catches the worm, where I've had a few streams that were like at 6 a.m., for example, and I've known I had appointments in the morning. But it was really hard to figure out a way to circumvent this when it's set right at the time I'm going to stream usually. And there's a lot of people who are involved with this that are like it's hard to be able to do stuff in every instance. So from the bottom of my heart, I am sorry that the stream has been pushed back and it got delayed even further because of some, again, unforeseen circumstances. Um, I hope that we can play it through this time. I'm going to try again. And I really did try to salvage that last stream, but I just kept getting interrupted. First, I had somebody call me, then another person walk in, and I sat here with them for like an hour. It's really difficult to stream when people are around because even if it's just like one or two others, um, they can really like just straight up barrel roll your stuff. And then when you throw in how I had this other person call me and they were asking all these questions, it's it's really difficult um, to not have that stuff play out in a way where it makes it to where you can't carry out all of your intentions. Um, so I hope we won't get interrupted again. If we do, I might try one more time because I'm not going to keep doing this over and over if we're going to get the same results repeatedly. But if that doesn't work, then I'll probably like upload a video and then that'll just have to be it for today because it's been pretty frustrating last 24 hours. Um, a lot of stuff is happening that's not good. A lot of stuff is happening that feels kind of regressive in a way. And I really hope that things don't turn out as they did during that last attempt at a stream, which was going all right until we got to that final. I think it was 8 minutes of it, and then it's just it wouldn't stop. Um, which is why I decided to terminate it. So I think that's the first instance where I've had two separate people interrupt, and it's like one's in person and the other one is on the phone. That might be like a new record of just these like different types of interruptions. Like you're right, if you're not calling me, you're physically coming into my domain. So um, I really hope that doesn't happen again. And I'm gonna try to make sure it doesn't this time. But if it does, well, then we'll make one more attempt and then we'll say forget it. And then on top of that, my Wi-Fi was acting up, which it does all the time. So that's not a big surprise. But usually, if I go onto my network, it doesn't do this. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see and figure out if it happens again. I always try to shoot for an hour and a half. Excuse me, for 2 hours, and then if I can't go that far, I'll just do an hour and a half. So I think we're off to a pretty decent start right now. Um, one of the things we were talking about in that last stream before the dark times of the last couple of hours was that you have a lot of people who swear up and down they're a fan of something, they love something, this is a great series. This is a great movie. This is an amazing book. This is an amazing artist. But it seems as if they find themselves so rarely actually engaging with the stuff that they claim to like. And what I mean by this, and I was using my friend as an example of how this is an individual who said that he thought, um, which what's a good way of starting it? So this is the person that watched Dragon Ball Super, for example, um, but then couldn't remember basic plot details of Dragon Ball Z, which is a much more popular. I mean, if it weren't for its popularity, Super wouldn't it literally would not exist. Um, and the reason he couldn't remember these plot details is because he hasn't actually seen this show since he was a kid, and he has this same philosophy seemingly for everything that he claims to like. When I say claim, I'm not saying I doubt that he likes this stuff, but it seems really bizarre to me that if you enjoy or are a fan of something, you would never engage with the material of that particular thing you enjoy, especially if it's something you've seen before and apparently have a high opinion of. Just to give you another example, I was talking about how he had the goal, and I don't understand this opinion at all. But he had the goal to say that he thought Garfield was the best Spider-Man, and and TASM 2 was the best Spider-Man movie. And I asked him, just out of morbid curiosity, what do you like more about this version than the others? What is distinct about this version? Um, he gave some vague answer about how in that series characters died, even though in all three of the Raimi films characters pass away. Um, and I'm pretty sure it's the same way for the MCU trilogy as well, where with the possible exception of Homecoming, in Far From Home and No Way Home, there are character passings as well. So I relayed this to him, and then he said something about how he needs to see those again, or he hasn't seen those in like a long time, or like he's going off of like I guess muscle memory. But then what I realized was that the reason he can say something like this and not sound entirely nuts is because he's another one of these people that how to explain it, who sees something once when it comes out and then they use their vague memory of it to define whether it was good or not. So he probably, and this is just my opinion of his opinion, likes the TASM films more than the Raimi films because he doesn't even remember what happened in the Raimi films at all because he hasn't seen them since he was a kid and the TASM films were more recent. Um, but what I thought was really interesting is that when I was describing how I really despise TASM 2, I think it's one of the worst superhero films ever, just complete garbage movie. I mentioned that I would never watch that film again because I don't like to watch stuff I don't enjoy. And I was pointing out how insane it is that the person who likes this movie so much so that they claim it's the best one in this whole franchise will never watch it again, or can't be bothered to watch it again, I should say. It's not like he made a vow, but he won't watch it again. And the person who doesn't like it at all will never watch it again with a vow. So do you see how we come from two opposite sides of the spectrum of whether you like or dislike this thing, but the movie gets the same result of having people who are not watching it, including someone who says they like it or love it or think it's great. No, this was a really interesting topic I thought about because, like, I've accepted a long time ago you have people who just are not going to watch, are not going to read comics, they're not going to watch certain stuff, whatever. But what do you say about people who claim to like something but can never be bothered to watch it again? I mean, imagine if I called myself an avid fan of The Last Airbender. It's one of my favorite series of all time. It's this great, amazing show, and I think it's it's um it's a highlight of television. And you ask me, when was the last time you saw it? Oh, back in 2008. You wouldn't say that's weird? Like, if this show is so great to you, and especially if you live in an era where it's readily available, where you can just click on this app and then the whole thing is there for you to watch anytime you want 24/7, why is it not worth by your own actions watching again? I think that's a valid question to ask because there was a reviewer um, who said that what was it, a story is only truly good once it's ended, and I thought the novelty of watching something once it's completed is that now you have you know where the story is going to go, and there are certain things you can pick up more on when you. It's not even you don't have to have a show end, but just like a season, you know where it's going. There's these hints and clues and tips, um, and it just really baffles me that if you think a work is good or otherwise decent or of some high quality, like as a production, as a thing that was created, why would you just never bother watching it after an initial viewing? Also, give me a second. I'll put a like on my stream. There we go. Always got to remember to put the likes on there because that's the only way to get people to engage with this stuff, I tell you. So, Akatsuki Merchant was here during the past stream and he mentioned how he reads X-Men comics whenever he can, and that he would feel weird calling himself a fan of the comics, but then like never of the characters, but never bothering to engage with their source material. And I was saying that while I didn't think that was necessarily the point I was trying to make, because my point is more about people who've actually seen or read something and then they like it so much that they can never read or watch it again. But one of the things that I thought was interesting about this is there are so many comic fans who just completely, and we've discussed this before, do not care about the comics of the characters they claim to love. And I mean, we live in an era where you can pretty much find any American superhero comic published between the early 40s up until now, like as recently as the last couple of days, online for free. And these people just they can't be bothered. And I guess so. Just to give you an example, you have some people who were upset about like Black Panther 2 taking, was it 4 years to come out, right? After the first one. And they were talking about how like, oh, they fast tracked Spider-Man, a character who was in all these other movies. And somebody said something like that where they fast tracked Spider-Man who already like a character who had been in however many movies before Civil War. And I was thinking to myself, how insane. I mean, Spider-Man is not just a character, he's Marvel's mascot. And he's Marvel's mascot because he's one of their highest selling characters consistently. That's why he gets all these different TV shows and movies before other characters do. But what I thought was really interesting was that, because I mentioned before, Black Panther is basically a supporting character who people try to prop up as being his own thing, right? They give him his own book. He gets canceled over and over. And it really sucks because I think he probably, of any Marvel superhero that's black, could most likely be the one to carry their own book because he has his own setting, he has his supporting characters, a couple enemies. But for whatever reason, people just have never felt the need to support this character like Superman or Batman or Spider-Man. And for that reason, Marvel thought, okay, we're going to make a movie about him. It might do moderately well, whatever, and then we'll get another one in like almost half a decade. And I really don't blame them because they had no way of predicting how successful that movie would be. But I should also say that were I someone who is trying to push this narrative that this is an essential character and we need representation, da 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 da, I would say to these people, if you love this character so much, if you think he's so great that he needs to be on the big screen every couple of years like these other major superheroes we draw out, why don't you buy his comic? Why don't all of you every month buy his comic and make it the best-selling Marvel book? Which would not be hard, by the way, because comics, are not read by most people anyway, so they don't get like millions and millions of sales. You might get a couple thousand, at most. So I'm just saying, it just seems weird to me that if these people really want to push this character so much, they would go, "Oh yeah, we're gonna get a movie every couple of years, but forget the thing that he appears in monthly that makes up the bulk of his appearances. That if it weren't for this, we wouldn't even have these films to begin with." I mean, it's like a literal Pandora's box. Black Panther 2 didn't come out until almost 5 years after the first one because Marvel correctly predicted this character is not one of our most popular, so we can hold off on doing a sequel for a while. An unfortunate event happened, Boseman's passing, and now people are pretending that this character is this, like, very important and he's just not. He's a character who's been canceled, what, 7 times? So I don't know. It's funny the webs people try to spin with this stuff. But going back to my point, I think I mentioned that I was rewatching Dragon Ball, the original show, and then I got to the start of Z with the Saiyan saga, and I was mostly done with the Saiyan saga. I've got like 10 more episodes left, and I was just thinking about how crazy it is that you'll have a show like that, referring to Dragon Ball, right? This like big, highly influential series. And you have all these people who swear up and down they love it, they like it, they love it, they like it. But every time I talk to one of them, especially American fans, I see a recurring pattern, which is they don't watch the show. Um, and if they're familiar, and it's what ended up happening is because I talked about this dark age before. There was a period of about 7 years where we had no new. The closest thing we had to a new show was Kai, which was not new. A garbage live action movie that everybody hated, and a bunch of games that ranged in quality from great to garbage. So what ended up happening was a lot of people felt like they didn't need to watch the show because the games kept retelling the story of the show over and over, which means that if they're familiar with the story, it's only because of all of these different cutscenes and playing through it repeatedly. Um, And this is actually a big part of the reason why a lot of them are very fluent with C, but they can't remember stuff that happened in the original show because it doesn't get adapted into a game as often as Z does, or anywhere near as much. But I said, isn't it sad that you have this extremely popular series, a series that defined a generation of shonen, right? All the big shonen artists and writers come out and admit Toriyama's influence on them. Oh my god. Same person interrupting as before. It never stops. Oh man, a lot of interruptions. Oh, I better mute this again because I just turned this thing on. You know what? I think I might not have to. Let me see. Yeah, okay, it's on zero. But like I was saying, I really do make an effort to rewatch a lot of stuff I like because I think it's a testament to how good it was if I can see it again. I don't know. Maybe I find that so weird because like even with stuff that I don't find necessarily entertaining, I still like. I give you an example. There are some documentaries that um, I wouldn't call them entertaining, like funny or anything like that. But I would still say they're good. They're informative. So I watch them repeatedly to remember what's in them. But I don't think there's any video, even like with regular YouTube videos. I don't think there's any video that I have found of some kind of inherent value where I only watched it once. So it's one of those things where I don't understand it. And normally I'll tell people like, "Hey, you do you, whatever," but it just seems so bizarre that if you enjoy something or think it's good, you would only ever see it one time. But I was because I mentioned that me and him were talking about Endgame, and he said something about Captain Marvel, and I was just like rolling my eyes. Um, and he forgot that Black Widow dies, and I was like, "How do you forget what is a fairly major character? I mean, what she's in what 7 movies, passing away halfway through." But then I remembered this is the person who doesn't rewatch anything, so he probably hasn't seen it since came out in what 2019. He probably hasn't seen it since back then. Um, but I don't know. It's just I don't understand this line of thinking in anything. Like when I want to learn about something, even if I won't read a whole book again, like certain passages I'll read more than once. When I want to, I really can't think of anything that I would say I like or find of value that I've only ever listened to or watched or read one time. So it's just it's weird to me. Like I don't understand it. Oh man, it's too bad that Kotsky Merchant didn't come over there. Sure could use him. Yeah, this stuff is such a I don't know, it's just really annoying. But yeah, even on here, there's a lot of videos that I wouldn't say they're my favorite, but if I think they're really funny or like really because there's a lot of those channels where they talk about like true crime, for example. And I'm not even talking about the lazy stuff where they just sit there and talk or whatever, but actually make a video where it's edited and it's got footage and all the rest of that. I'll watch a lot of those repeatedly because of how well made they are. Like I've always enjoyed the spectacle of someone going into like iMovie, Windows Movie Maker, whatever, and taking the time to get a bunch of clips, write out a script, um, discuss some things that you might not have heard before. I've always really been marveled at just how much effort is put into it, just like out of respect for their what's the way of saying it? I want to say their I guess you call it their contribution, if that's the way you want to refer to it. But I don't quite understand why people are like this. That's really crazy with documentaries. I'll watch them repeatedly. I've always really liked those because they have these historians, people that actually know what they're talking about, and they ask a bunch of them questions, and they all just kind of talk about whatever the issue is. And there's always a certain level of professionalism that they have about it. Like they didn't just pick some random guys off the street. These are all people that have researched it to some extent or another. Um, but I don't know. It's so weird that when you have and at first I thought this was just something people do when it comes to like shows, like, oh, this show is so long. You'll hear that often said, but I've really realized that a lot of people, no matter what it is, it could be a show, a movie, etc., will make time for things that they think are entertaining or good. Um, so even when they tell you that something is long, it doesn't really work, or it's like a defense that they kind of have built in. But then when you remember that they do the same thing with movies, which are almost always shorter than shows, right? They can't rewatch a movie they claim they liked or that they claim was good or that they claim they want to watch. Um, it makes a lot of sense that there's just this. It's like a combination of laziness and what's another way of putting it? I guess you could say it's it's laziness and contradictions. Probably would be the best word to put it. Because with this guy, it's like my friend. He really does want to discuss this stuff with me, but he doesn't. It's hard discussing something with a person who's not informed on the topic. And usually, if it's something history related, I can go, okay, well, you know what? There are so many different historical figures and factoids that I can give leeway to it. But if we're talking about a movie or a show where all you have to do is sit there and watch it from scene to scene, there's no research, there's no reading 500 books to learn about 10 people. I'm a lot less forgiving because it's like you want me to discuss this with you while being ignorant of the topic that we're talking about. And then I have to sit here and explain, like, no, this happens in this arc. Why can't you just watch the damn show? I mean, I don't understand where there's like this weird thing where these people want to talk to you about stuff that they don't even watch. They want to make observations that they have no backing of because they've done no research on the topic. Just like same guy says, "Oh, the only movies that have opening credits are Star Wars." Now, opening credits are their credits in the opening, so like the movie will say starring this person, that person, um, and they're the same thing as end credits. They're just at the beginning, and they usually only have the actors. Sometimes they have like producers, director, whatever. But what I thought was crazy was that right after he says this, and I start listing off loads of movies from the 60s, 70s, the 80s, even I think there were even some in the 90s, right? Had opening credits. He then goes and says, "Oh, well, I don't watch that many movies, whereas I am someone that does." Um, so do you see how they make an observation or they make some kind of like high claim, and then once they start getting pushback on it by someone who actually knows about like what they're talking about, they then admit their ignorance because they don't want to like actually fess up to not knowing what they're saying. It'd be like if I said, most animals don't eat meat, and you're a veterinarian, you're like, actually, mammals do, and this includes this type of animal. And then as you start, I'm like, well, to be fair, I haven't researched most animals. It's like, then why did you just say that most animals don't eat meat? No, if you haven't researched them, why would you make a declaration about them? No, it's really hard to discuss stuff with people when they don't know what you're talking about. And it's not even your fault that they don't know because they're the ones who actively choose to not rewatch stuff. Oh man. Ah, this website never fails to be annoying. But anyways, going back to what I was saying, anytime I see that I've lost a subscriber, I just put my hand on my chest and give up. Going back to what I was talking about, you had this person who, what's a good way of putting it? I'm trying to remember. I don't know. It just seems like if something is good and enjoyable, wouldn't you want to see it again? I mean, I really liked Dark Knight, for example, to where that was one of the first movies that I bought on DVD back when I was a kid, and I've seen it at least 10 times. Like there was a period where I would just have it on my computer playing and like in the background or like something because I've always really liked it. It still is probably one of my favorite superhero movies. But what I'm conveying here is that I think it's really crazy how just stepped on that bottle. How you have like a lot of people that say they like this stuff, and I swear sometimes you almost think they see a movie as like a live event where once it happens, that's it, and you just never replay it ever. I don't know. It's weird. It's really really weird. Oh, oh man. Oh, too bad Akatsuki Merchant is gone. I could really use him right now. That's why I hate when they interrupt streams because it always met like someone usually doesn't come back. So you end up sitting there and like, oh, I hope this person returns. Nope. Man, that sucks. Um, I don't know. I just what's another way of considering it? I guess I'm usually more open-minded or sympathetic to people who are like, hey, look, this show is 100 episodes, 200, 300, 400. Because I do understand where somebody can get like put off about rewatching something when it's really long. But the problem is that a lot of these same people will look at an American cartoon, and most of those are nowhere near as long as Japanese cartoons. Some of them are maybe like I've even seen one person decline to watch a show that was 20 episodes, 20 something. So it's like don't sit here and tell me about how the 500 episode show is too much to rewatch, but then when you're watching a show that's when you refuse to watch a show that's not even 30 episodes, it just makes it look like there's no winning with you. It's kind of like if I said, oh, I don't want to work this 10-hour shift. Okay, how about you come in for two? Oh, it's too much. You see how whether it's 10 or two, if it's literally cut into a fifth, you're just like, nope, too much. No, I was rewatching. I mentioned something the other time. I was rewatching Dragon Ball when I was at the start of Z. Um, and I plan to watch until at least the end of the Cell saga, and then maybe I can watch the Boo stuff at some other point. It's just that Boo is a slog to get through for me personally, and a lot of people are like, "Well, there's Kai." I said, "Yeah, but the Boo Saga in Kai is still 60 episodes. Like they trimmed 30 down. It's like it's not even really a problem with its length. It's that it's just this extremely what's the way of putting it? Lengthy story that just drags and drags and twists and turns in ways that I've never felt were natural and like the writer couldn't make up what he was doing. It's that's why it's less so about the length, which is already long. It's like 96 episodes, but more so about the story itself just being something I generally don't look forward to watching all the way through. Now, of course, there are some moments or highlights and stuff that I think is really good, but in general, it's the hardest part of the series to rewatch. One for its length, and two for just the flow of it and the actual story itself. Arc is 96 episodes. God, so it's always interesting to think about. Some of these arcs are longer than whole series. Like to just watch this one arc, you could watch two series that are two American cartoons in the same duration of time because they're nowhere near as long. I remember when I was a kid, I used to really be into the idea of like having longer shows. Like, oh, I wish this cartoon got another season. I wish this cartoon got another 30 episodes. But I guess now, just after aging, and I got, like I look back and I think, maybe it's for the best if some of these shows aren't that long. Um, because every time you have a show that's longer than maybe a season or two or three, you have these people who arbitrarily, and I do mean that with complete sincerity, they'll say this no matter if your show only has 40 episodes or 400. They'll say, "Oh, it's too long. It's too long. I don't have enough time to watch it. It's too long." And I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, like, look, I know with all these different shows, it seems like, oh my God, the length, the length, the length. But I'm sorry, if you actually watch a few episodes a day, it could be one, it could be two, it could be three, you'll get through it. I mean, you can always just say you don't want to watch it. That's fine, but don't sit here and act like it's impossible to watch this show. That's why I said I'm just so tired of people and their excuses. Just like I keep getting all these unsolicited show recommendations. But when you really think about the people who refuse to watch this stuff again, it does make them look like bandwagoners. Like, oh, people are saying this movie is good. Well, I guess I have to go see it. And after it's over, after they see it, they talk about it for maybe a week and then never again. And I said that's really sad when you think about it. That like you can have this series that we call it like a lot of people enjoy, say it's good, whatever. And then after you make this like what's it go oh, I think yeah, that was the example I gave on the last stream that I was like a really big fan of The Last Airbender when I was a kid. It came out when I was in, I think, second grade. For yeah, um, and I remember distinctively that around the time it ended, there was this other cartoon that was on Nickelodeon as well, and it was called Fanboy and Chum Chum, and I thought it was one of the worst series, and that was a pretty big thing because back then I certainly was not as judgmental of stuff that I would watch. I thought the art style, it was like a CGI show, was like plain. I thought the characters looked dumb, horrible personalities, no personalities, boring. Not boring, but just like really stupid and just it just seemed like something that a network would regret making because of how nonsensical it was. And it wasn't even like funny in like some absurd way, but it was just devoid of anything I could latch onto. So imagine if I never brought up The Last Airbender in any public stream. I never rewatched it after seeing it when I was a kid. Do you realize that if I did this to the Last Airbender, a show I really enjoy, thinks very good, etc., um, I would be treating it no better than a show that I think is terrible. A show that like Fanboy and Chum Chum that I think should be left to the dustbins of history in terms of, and not even history, but just like something that if nobody ever brought up again, nothing of any value would be lost. I mean, I really, what I'm trying to convey here is that when something is good or decent or otherwise a thing that you think is worth watching, there should be some discussion about it. There should be people rewatching it or watching it more than once or showing it to their friends. There should be some attempt to signify, hey, this actually was a thing I enjoyed. And when you're completely fine with only seeing something one time, and then, I mean, when you speak about it, you don't even remember what happened in the thing yourself. Um, you are effectively resigning it to a fate that should be reserved for something you didn't like. Because things I don't like, I don't watch more than once if I can avoid watching it. Now, there have been some movies where I've seen them more than once. It's because another person wanted, like, I was watching it with them and they haven't seen it. So I end up having to see it twice. But generally speaking, stuff I don't like, and I'm talking about like, I would never avoid Batman and Robin because it's a funny movie that I don't think is good, but it still is entertaining. Um, Same thing with The Room, but something that I don't like that I think is devoid of any kind of thing I could find appealing or interesting or even entertaining, you will never see me watch it again unless somebody else is like the cause of that because they haven't seen I'm watching with them. I gave the analogy of how I've done like streams in the past talking about how people celebrate, not celebrate, but they like glorify like these different serial killers because they make documentaries and you know movies about them over and over and over again. And then with people who've actually done good things that maybe never got any kind of recognition because it was stuff they were supposed to do, um, almost nothing ever. And I was thinking to myself, as much as I don't like that, as much as I think that's lame, as much as I really don't, I always have to clarify. I'm not trying to say making a bad cartoon makes somebody comparable to a murderer. I'm simply stating that if something is considered bad and something is considered good, the thing that's considered good should be the one that people talk about, they praise, they watch repeatedly, they have discussions about. That should be the thing that stands the test of time. And it's so interesting how like in real life, it really does seem as if it's way more easier to get remembered for doing something wrong or bad than doing something good. Like I could get I could do it. Remember, I think we mentioned before, like doing the documentaries. I could do documentaries on every historical figure that I thought was important that people don't talk about enough, and probably never end up getting any significant recognition for it. And when I say that, I'm talking about like newspapers, like, oh my God, this talented young man has decided to do these documentaries on various historical figures and educate a new generation, that type of stuff, like actual praise from publications. But if you go out tomorrow and you take a pickaxe or some other weapon and assault or end the life of another human being, you're going to find your name on every news station around you, if not nationally. And it takes infinitely less talent to do the latter than the former. But because one is encouraged and the other one is not. See, that's why I said that I've always felt like a lot of times I think years ago I did like a top 10 subscribers video. And I was like, oh, I believe in giving people like credit when they do something right. It's like I stuff like that is purposely designed to incentivize, like, hey, if you act in a manner that is decent, that is good, that is humane, that is not wrong in terms of treating myself or others badly, you get some reward or acknowledgement for it, even if it's not much. And again, it's like I freely admit that like that stuff like that is not some big huge thing that's being done. and favor these people, but it still is something tangible that they can see being done toward them for being good or otherwise doing a nice thing. Um, but it's so crazy how we really do, in some subconscious way, encourage people to act like villains, to do bad things, and you know, just to get off this topic for a second, but when I was bringing up those shows, like you look at a movie like The Room, for example, and it's considered bad by people. Whether you want to call it bad or not is whatever. I'm just going off of what the consensus seems to be. It's a bad movie. But it's a well-remembered movie. It's a movie that is one of the contenders for the worst films of all time. It's a movie that people have made loads of videos about, that people actively watch, that they're entertained by. Now, there are some people who like other movies and will say, this movie is good, this movie is great. But notice how a lot of the stuff they claim to enjoy, they claim to like, it doesn't get as much attention as The Room. So, which one is truly bad? The work that people claim is bad that gets acknowledged and rewatched and revisited by scores of people who think it's entertaining to no end, or the one that is supposedly good but that no one ever seems to talk about or acknowledge beyond a small tight knit group of people, which is what they call things a cult following. I think that's really interesting just to think about the dichotomy of, if something's good, it should be talked about more than something that is considered bad, right? I mean, why would you praise something that you don't think is good? But instead, it seems like the reverse is true. That you just have a bunch of people who just sort of, they seem to really embrace taking things that are considered bad and discussing them to know. I mean, another good example. Look at, if we're going to go back to Sonic for a second. Look at Sonic Next Gen. This is a game that everybody says is rushed, terrible, etc. Whole bunch of videos about it. But I bet there are better games that people don't talk anywhere near as much about. And unfortunately, that's just the way that this stuff goes. That the things that are claimed to be decent or otherwise of some greater quality, they don't get as much acknowledgement. Just to go back for a second, because this also relates to the Sonic thing. So I mentioned earlier that you have people who like don't engage with their own material, right? And that's why I really liked it when Akatsuki Merchant in the previous stream said that he reads X-Men comics as much as he can because he wants to, actually support the works that these characters debuted in. But when I was thinking about it, I thought to myself, isn't it crazy that um, you have like I I guess it's when I think of what he said and I think of like how I have always been, it's harder for me to empathize with these people because even back when I was a kid, as someone that played the Sonic games, I watched the different shows, Sonic X, Sad AM, had different opinions of each one, but the point is still gave them a chance. Um, I read the Archie comic, the 200 something issue series that um, was criminally canceled a couple years back, which I still think is insane. Um, the point I'm making is, even back when I was underage, didn't have as many resources, whatever, there still was a desire to engage with all of the stuff relating to these works. There still was a passion to like say, hey, you know what? I want to see what this story is about. It's got the same characters written by some people that are official. I want to see what kind of direction they're taking these characters in. And you just don't have that. But I even brought up how Star Wars fans are just they're an extremely toxic group. They're antagonistic towards others. They talk down to people who don't agree with them. We can be here all day. But the one thing they have over most fan bases is that they actually care about their brand and try to engage with the majority of stuff that comes out of their brand. I know Star Wars fans who flipped their lid when Disney said back in was that 2014 that almost all of the EU stuff was non-canon because they like Mara Jade and um, what was it, Jason Solo? They they even have members of that fan base who don't play video games. But guess what? They found themselves playing Force Unleashed and Battlefield and um, Knights of the Old Republic, which I still want to play. That game looks amazing. It was always on a console I didn't have, and it came out when I was a kid, so it's one of the reasons why I didn't bother with it. Here being is that there are people who are into these different things, and then there are some that don't even like cartoons, and they found themselves watching and loving Clone Wars. So what I'm conveying to you is, as much as Star Wars fans as a collective do things I don't like, do things I think are wrong, and it's not all of them, so don't even come here trying to say that I'm characterizing them all as being bad because that's not true. Um, they're probably the closest thing to a dedicated fan base I've ever seen personally. Like we talk about the Dragon Ball fans who won't watch the original series and how nuts that is. You're not going to get any Star Wars fans who haven't seen the original trilogy. That's just not going to happen. Those movies have been in circulation and swatted back and forth for 30 plus years now, 40 years for two of them. So, it's just so weird that people actually sit here and they don't um they don't think there's something wrong with this stuff. They don't think there's something wrong with having a show or a series you claim to like or love that you can't be bothered to watch more than once. That when it puts out something new, you usually don't check it out, or if you do check it out, you only see it that one time, no matter how good it was. And that's why I was talking about how when I was getting these anime recommendations, always unsolicited, I don't ask people what should I watch. They always tell me what I should watch. Um, they were talking about Attack on Titan, Hunter x Hunter, um, Jujutsu Kaisen, Vinland Saga, My Hero Academia, Black Clover, all this stuff, right? The reason I never took any of it seriously was, first of all, I'm not this person who just needs to constantly check out new series because I've got enough that I like that are either ongoing or over, and I'm fine with that. But secondly, who's to say that the people who recommend this stuff aren't a bunch of bandwagoners? That once these different series end or are over or finish or wrap up or conclude, um, we won't find ourselves seeing them completely ignored. Because the same thing has happened to bigger series before. I mean, look at Naruto. When I was a kid, everyone used to go around with their headband. Oh, believe it. The little hand signs, right? But after that series wrapped up, there are a lot of people, my friend included, who couldn't be bothered to watch it again. And if they have watched anything Naruto related, it's usually Boruto, which they only watch because it's new. We talked about that before, that people will say, "Oh, you only like this older thing because of nostalgia." It's like, well, you only like this newer thing because it's new. That's why we said it. You call me liking something older nostalgia. I call you liking something newer recency bias, which is a thing that has been documented and proven. I usually even like to get caught up in stuff like that. Like if somebody likes something new or whatever, old or whatever, but I don't know, it feels like there's always these weird psychological tests as to like why do you like this? Why do you enjoy this? And I noticed that there's a lot of people who are caught up on this idea that by not watching something, let's go ahead and putting it by watching something that they don't want to watch, you are by not watching it, you're like limiting yourself or you're missing out. And I'm like, look, when people tell me they don't want to watch something I like, you don't see me saying that stuff to them. So why do I have to have it said to me? And that's why I said before, I always get told about how I'm not tolerant of other people's opinions, but I'm usually the one that gets people shoving their opinions down his throat. Like it's not enough that they like this; they have to get you to like it as well. And that's just not a belief system I can agree with. It's like if you enjoy this, all right, cool, but don't sit here and try to tell me that I need to go watch this show and that show and this show and that show and this show and that show, just to talk to you about this. Especially when usually what ends up happening is you'll find one person that knows that series and like 30 that know Dragon Ball, for example. So it's like you really expect me to read or watch this whole thing to talk to you about it. Seriously, that's what I'm expected to do, just to speak to one person. That's why I said it's just weird. Like, where do these people come from with this stuff? At some point, I do want to make like a little Google Doc where I just list all the different shows and movies I want to rewatch. Because there's a lot of stuff out there, and it's like sometimes you have to just plan it out. But I am serious when I say that I do think in the digital age, with all these apps and places to go to where you can watch some movie either for free or for some limited price, it really doesn't make any sense to me how anyone can just be curious about seeing. And the thing that drives me nuts is that there are rare movies. There are movies that I'm not even joking are so rare that sometimes the only way to get them and watch them in a digital capacity, so like not buying a DVD or tracking a DVD down, is to go on some offshoot website because they're just not posted anywhere. And what drives me crazy is that you have this like stuff like that. Okay, that's I'm sympathetic if you're trying to look for some movie that is not on. It's not on iTunes. It's not on YouTube movies. It's nowhere. It's just it's like very very difficult to see it. Right. The problem I have is that people treat major blockbusters, films that are readily available whenever you want to see it, either in theaters or on home media, and they can't be bothered to go out and watch it. And it's like, dude, if you're not gonna see this stuff, I'm not gonna give you a plot summary. I'm not like I and we're not even gonna talk about this because every time we try to discuss this stuff, you don't remember it. And you go, oh, I need to rewatch. It's like you're not gonna rewatch anything. Like at a certain point, if I get irritated with that kind of stuff, it's because it keeps happening. It's like imagine having a series you want to talk to somebody about, and every time you lay down, you start to talk about, it, they go, because they haven't seen it in years, so they don't remember anything about it. And then they interrupt you to ask some question that they would know the answer to if they actually watched it for the first time since 2006. So I said, it's just, and again, like what drives me crazy is I don't have discussions like that on stuff I don't know much about. So if you say, "Hey, let's talk about science," like, okay, I'm not really into science. So, like I freely admit my ignorance. Same thing with math. Same thing with Game of Thrones or some other, some series I've never seen before, right? I'm not going to go, well, I saw this 15 years ago, so I guess we can have a rousing discussion, even though I don't barely remember what happened in it. So I said, it's just weird. So I said, it's just, again, what is the purpose of having a discussion on this stuff with someone who's never going to watch it, who it seems like no matter what show or movie you're talking about, they can't remember anything or very little about it because they can't be bothered to watch it again. I just don't see what good comes out of this. I really don't. Like, and again, what I always have, like, I keep having to preface stuff. If I say, hey, let's talk about this person says I haven't seen this in years, I don't really remember. Okay, that's fine. But when you have people who want to discuss stuff with you, and they don't remember a bunch of different movies because they can just never rewatch stuff ever. Um, it's really frustrating because it's like, how am I supposed to have a discussion with someone who every time they go to make a point, are they like they either make points that are very vague, or they're like saying something that is incorrect, or they're asking you a question about something that they should already know about. Like, what is the purpose of that? Why would that be an appealing discussion for me? The answer is it wouldn't. It's just so irritating. And I always say, look, if people like that stuff, they think it's fun to just sit there and talk to people who are like hell bent on this idea of you need to fill, you need to like fill me on the blanks of this stuff. I'm just gonna say, forget it. So I know I'm gonna be misinterpreted now. Somebody say, well, you just don't like that people don't like. No, this is not about that at all. It's about trying to understand where this thing started, where people say they like stuff and then they can never be bothered to watch it again. I like the baby arc in GT. I've watched it at least twice, and do want to watch it a third time actually if I can sit down. And I think it's probably been three times, but at least twice because I saw it on TV and I saw it, like online. Um, I probably would see it again if Hulu had the English stuff on there. But they don't. Man, Dragon Ball streaming rights are so weird. It's like, oh, you want to watch Dragon Ball? No problem. You can watch it subbed on Hulu. Oh, you want to watch it in English? No problem. Go over to Crunchyroll. And then if you go on the iTunes store, you can get all the movies. So why are the movies purchasable on there, but then the show you have to like go on all these different apps? And so I said it's just annoying. I don't know. I feel like these apps are making it to where now it's kind of like, do I really own this? Like, oh, here's this data on the screen I can watch when I want to, and then if I guess I can get a physical copy as well. Yeah, I always did prefer physical stuff. Like I hate reading books on Kindle and all the rest of that. I like when you can just hold something in your hand. I don't know. I think people are getting too obsessed with having everything in one place because I don't know. Just I don't. I've never felt like I really own stuff if I just have it. Like, oh, here's this 1,000-page book on my phone. You know. Speaking of books, if someone doesn't want to reread those, I'm sympathetic because some books are very long. Um, but generally speaking, I probably I probably would get more annoyed if it's one that's shorter because some books are 100 pages, some are 200, just of all kind of varying lengths. But for me, it's always hard to reread a book because it's usually hard to read it in the first place, like to sit there and read like 20 pages a day, 30, 40. It takes like for me it can take several days or several weeks to read a book. It's not something that's really that easy for me, I admit. It's usually because it's just hard for me to just sit there and just read it and do nothing else. Oh, Katsuki Merchant, you finally showed up again. Yeah, what happened with that stream was someone came in here, um, and I was like thinking, okay, they're just gonna do something with this device, and then they had like a whole series of steps they wanted me to go through. Oh, you finally appeared at last. I know you've had some. Don't worry, it will not be like this on Saturday. I can promise you that. I can certainly guarantee that. It's just there's a lot of stuff that's been happening that we had to make accommodations for. Um, I'm trying to remember what else you wrote on that stream where you were talking about how people are because I mentioned the part where you meant that you said you were reading X-Men. And I think I told you that I do X-Men's one of my favorite Marvel properties, just comic properties, period. And my favorite superhero team. But the reason I haven't reread the stuff I read a couple months ago, like the early run by Stan Lee and then Chris Claremont stuff, etc., is because I'm reading other stuff. So if I don't reread those, it's going to be because I'm reading something else. Um, but I did like the part where you mentioned how the source material is the thing that you should know if you're like a big fan of characters. And I mentioned like when you weren't here, but I talked about how this is not some blanket like you get where we try to like have nuance, like another trying to paint everybody with a broad brush, like, oh, you've only seen this or read this once. That's because you don't really like it. There are like, for example, I try to watch a couple of new movies every week. Sometimes I only watch one, sometimes I watch several. So if I don't rewatch something that I saw a couple months back, it's literally because I keep watching new films that I've never seen before. Um, and I'm just trying to say to you that these people are not like me in the sense that they are purposely never going to read this stuff. And it gets even worse when you consider that they can't even be bothered to rewatch the things they claim to like or have enjoyed in the past. Because for them, everything is just this one time dopamine rush of an experience. And then after that, they just wait for whatever else comes out and forget about it the next day. Which is why I said my friend that forgot that Black Widow died in Endgame probably hasn't seen that movie since it came out. He was trying to talk. He was criticizing Man of Steel for having like Zod's neck getting snapped by Superman and how, oh, I thought there should have been more climax. It was something like just whatever, right? Um, and when I told him that Zod was coming back in the Flash, was that next year, 10-year anniversary, right? Really excited because I really like Zod and Man of Steel. He's like, oh, why is Zod one of the best superhero movie villains according to you? But you know why he asked me that, right? Because he hasn't seen that movie since it came out 10 years ago, which is why I said that like all this stuff is just you see it one time and then that's it. You get that big experience and then that's that. Why is Zod one of the best superhero movie villains? I said, well, you could always watch the movie and actually come to your own conclusion. Oh my god. I'm telling you, these people just come out of nowhere with this stuff. Actually, I would give that to the Magneto. No, I didn't say Zod was the best superhero movie villain. I said he was one of the best. So, like, if I did like a top 10 or something, you know what I mean? Like, it's like a thing where it's like the best ones. Because I do think that that version of Zod is very sympathetic. He's very complex. Um, we discussed this before, if you remember, on another stream. But I didn't say it was the best. I say it was one of the best. I mean, I like that version of Zod so much that they gave me a whole spin-off series with him on Krypton. I wouldn't have complained at all. Yeah, it's just it's a really interesting contradiction I like this movie so much. When's the last time you saw it? Oh, the time I was in the theater. Yeah, I've seen Man of Steel maybe 3 times, maybe 4 times because I watched it on when it came out, then I saw it on my computer once or it could have been 2 times, 1 time, because I was, like, trying to refresh my memory, and then I saw it on HBO Max, so it's been at least 3 times. Yeah, I really hope that, and, people have been putting all kind of rumors out about Flash, but I really hope Zod survives that and they keep using him in the DCEU because they really could use that as a means of bringing him back into the main universe. I mean, hey, it worked for Loki. He got his neck snapped, and he's then he got his own show. I already said before, I'm not the biggest fan of alternate versions of characters played by the same actor. Um, After the characters died, because it erases like all the development they had before that. But considering that in Loki's case, that was a character who had been in what 5 movies, and then they erased all the stuff. Whereas with Zod, he was only in one. I'm more open to him being used again or recurringly, I should say. No, we're talking about best supervillains. I mean, from Marvel, it's easily Doom and Magneto. I was just saying out of the live action performances, although I do really like what was it, Ian McKellen as Magneto in the original X Men trilogy. I just wish he had better material to work with. Oh, the problem with the Fassbender version is they do this thing where they keep having him go from bad guy to good guy, and he just zigzags, like he can't pick which side to stand. And the thing about Magneto in the comics is usually when that happens, it's been like 10 years, 15 years of him as a good guy or something, or like an anti-hero. Um, like there's like a slow burn to descending to either side. Whereas with a movie, when you do it every movie, it's not really like a progressive thing we get to see without coming across as annoying. Like you just pick a side already. God, people just drive me nuts with this stuff. No, Magneto was one of my favorite parts of Uncanny. I think it's issue 200 where they have his trial. I like Magneto simply because he's compelling villain without being over the top, evil, or overpowered. I mean, he's just a very simple character to understand. He wants to make the world a better place for mutants, but due to persecutions from both being a mutant and being a survivor of one of the worst humanitarian crises in all of history, the Holocaust, he is willing to do whatever means to make sure that his people are in a position to be better off. Like it makes total sense that he doesn't agree with Professor X given his backstory, like his motivation of just having seen what pacifism leads you to. He's one of those characters where you don't agree with what he's doing, but you can still understand it. Yeah, He's definitely one of the best supervillains in all of American comics. Period. Just a really complex, interesting character. He's really the only villain I can think of that's like really intimidating, and then when they become a good guy, they're like still cool. And he also uses his abilities in smart ways rather than trying to overwhelm his opponents with multiple attacks. Yeah, there's an issue where Storm, I think, tries to kill him in his sleep, and he's able to use his the magnetism to like detect that she's coming like while he's dreaming. Like his subconscious is able to pick it up. But I'm just saying, like one of the things I really look forward to doing if I go back and reread Uncanny is seeing his character arc unfold because it's really good. I mean, if you actually read from Uncanny number 1 all the way up until his trial, and you just see all these different things that he does and screw with the X-Men and um his like eventual turn to the side of good makes a lot of sense. I still think the most profound thing with him is from that same story with Storm trying to kill him in his sleep, where like he injures like critically or heavily injures Kitty Pride, who's also Jewish and a mutant, and he's like, I'm no better than the people that I am against. I mean, this is someone with my exact same background. And look what I did to them. And then he tells Storm that she can kill him if she wants. Just a really complex, well-rounded antagonist. Like I know everybody loves to suck off Avengers, but I've always thought X Men were just a better group. They better characters, better villains. I mean, go beyond Magneto. You got Apocalypse, Mister Sinister, Mystique. Even the human villains like Robert Kelly. You know, there's it's just an interesting, very interesting lore that's associated with that particular part of the Marvel universe, or the fact that he can sense high trace of metal in a person's blood and even manipulate it. There's that. Celine, Gallo, Juggernaut. Yeah, I forgot to mention the Hellfire Club. Well, you know, Juggernaut's really iconic with that. I mean, his design is like instantly recognizable to a lot of people that aren't even like big X Men fans because like it's that red dome over the head, right? And then you know, like the always running. Can't believe I forgot to mention Juggernaut. That's a big mistake on my part. I really can't believe I didn't like he just didn't occur to me when I was thinking of that because I guess the reason for that is probably since if I'm not thinking of Magneto because he's the most iconic of the villains, right? I'm thinking of probably Apocalypse due to the Age of Apocalypse story from the comics and then like the movie Apocalypse. And then Mr. Sinister because he's like really heavily involved with the Scott and Jean stuff. I like Celine Gallo because she was a perfect thwarting force for for Professor X. Emma Frost played that role well too. Speaking of Emma, she I think I told you I really when I was a kid liked Astonishing X-Men because it was this nice like book that you could read without having read anything X-Men related in the past, and you would be almost missing nothing. Like it wasn't a reboot, but it was it felt You know what I'm talking about? It's like it's new reader friendly. There's some references to stuff from the past, but it still feels like something that you like anyone could just pick up who's never read comics before. And I gotta admit, like after that book and probably the latter issues of Uncanny, it's really hard to think of X-Men without Emma because she's basically the main her and Kitty Pryde are like the main females on there. And it's she like they push Emma so much in modern X-Men stuff for like the last 15 or 20 years. It's always interesting when superhero teams have some character that start off as a villain, they become a good guy. Because sometimes it's the intent of the writer who introduced them to have it be that way, and other times it's not. So like some other writers like, I like this character. I'm gonna make him become a good guy. I just always thought that was interesting. Mm. Man, I'm really streaming at 5 again. It's the first time I've done that since probably I remember this the Saturday streams used to be like at 5 or 6. And I started doing it earlier because I was like, why do I have to wait until this one specific hour? It meant that the X-Men couldn't rely on Professor X to mentally stop an antagonist and actually have to figure out ways to outmaneuver them. Yeah, it's funny reading the original X-Men run and then going into Claremont stuff. Professor X gets like put out of commission a lot. Like there's a story in it's before the book gets canceled the first time. There's a story where he's like supposedly deceased, and for multiple I think it was like 10 issues he's just, and I know he's not actually passed because stuff that comes after, but it's like it was part of some kind of lore or some type of trick. I don't know, it's really interesting just how much they like for um I really don't want to make this comparison, but there's another series that was talked about earlier where there's a certain main character who, for the most part, just doesn't do anything or is like taken out of commission or not around. That's really what Professor X is in like a lot of X-Men comics, where he just has these prolonged periods where he's not involved whatsoever. Like he's just off to the side, hanging out somewhere. You know, he's passed away or he's like in another time zone, or it's really interesting just how much a character who's so significant, like significantly involved with the team, really isn't around as often as one might think. Oh man, it's been a very long day. It's because Professor X is an extremely powerful telepath and could end any alteration with the villain with just a simple psychic attack. Well, my rebuttal to that is, like with Magneto, his helmet counters the psychic attacks, right? So why not just whenever you have villains and you have to figure out a way to make them um, work with the hero in mind, that means if you have a character who has like some really powerful attack or whatever, you need to find some way of countering it. Like look at the Avatar state in the original Last Airbender. Very powerful move, super strong, pretty much can take out anybody. That's why for Aang to use it, he would have to be under some extreme duress, or it wasn't just something he could just snap his fingers and turn on because then he could win every fight. Which is why in the inferior sequel series, Korra, when she turns it on manually, they have her get smashed and beat up easily because if they didn't nerf the avatar state, then she would win every fight as well. No, if you have a telepathic character, you make characters who either cannot have their minds messed with because of their own powers, or they have something protecting their minds as the villains, Like, so I said, you got with a lot of these stories, people have gotten to a point where they just become complacent and they don't really think outside the box or try to do anything that interesting anymore. All right, almost done charging that thing. So yeah, I'm not trying to argue with you or poo-poo your opinion. I'm just saying that I think if writers are actually working as good as they should, yeah, give the villain something that can counter the hero. Look at that. That was one of, to go back to the Dragon Ball example. Look at what happened with Boo in the tournament, right? Oh, we can't. They're not going to use him because he's too powerful. He can turn people to chocolate. Make characters that are impervious to his magic, that his powers cannot work on, which will not completely nerf him because he can still fight. He's still powerful. Um, or make it to where, like, look at what happened with Vegito and Super Boo, where Vegito, as a little piece of candy, was still hurting Super Boo, right? So, to where Super Boo even turned him back into his regular form because of how powerful he was as this little chocolate gumball. But my thing is, if that's if you can do something like that in Z, why couldn't you do something like that in Super? Because they're not creative. If I make a character who has let's pretend it's a villain, right? Telepathic powers, she can mess with people's minds. I'm gonna write it in the story that the heroes find out she can do this, or he can do this, whatever, and they get some kind of helmets or some other thing that can prevent them from being messed with in this manner. No, villains are written to work with the hero in mind. So anytime you've got some overpowered villain, that's the writer's fault. I mean, look at Kishimoto. This is a guy who wrote Madara to be extremely powerful, to where he's like taking out all the Kages and he's, putting like the main characters on their deathbeds basically. And he admitted he had no idea how he was going to have them stop him. Like, he wrote himself into a corner, which is why he ended up deciding to replace Madara with this floating broad. It's like, that's another example where the writer didn't think this through, didn't give the heroes a way to counter the villain because he made the villain too powerful. So, he had to come up with something that left a lot of people dissatisfied. Yeah, you can have telepathic heroes or villains. You have to make characters that are, I mean, like, think about it. You have characters who don't have super strength, right? That can fight people with super strength because they have machinery, weapons, things that can hurt them, right? So I just think if people try hard enough, they can give somebody any kind of power, and people, and like whoever the other side is, can still have a chance. You can call me hopelessly optimistic, but that's just my opinion. I mean, look at YouTube. They realized how powerful I was with just 2,000 subs. So they're giving Butt Muncher 45 front page access to get him higher up so he can be close to my level. And that guy's rising. Every time he starts his video, he goes, "Hey guys," he rises, he gets bigger. So he's being given some abilities so he can counter the hero. YouTube knows he needs some boost. I mean, he even got a Kotsky merchant to subscribe to him. That's no small feat. In Celine's case, she was able to counter Professor X's psychic probe by trapping him in illusion. Yeah. But see, again, that's why I said that was written by someone who knew what they were doing. A lot of these other writers, they'll come up with some character that looks cool or they think is, impressive, because, shonen is always about impressing little boys. um, to where they don't even think about like, hey, how does this person function in the story? Is it a good idea to have someone that's this powerful? And in the case of Madara, in the case of well, I'm not going to say Boo because we didn't even get to see him in the tournament, but in a lot of cases, it's not. Yeah, I was really disappointed with Akatsuki merchant over there saying he likes my channel, but then you look at his channel, he's subscribed to Butt Muncher 45 and giving him a big old boost. That guy made a video yesterday. He was like, "Thanks, merchant. We're rising." Well, uh, we've been going for like, look, I was gonna go for 2 hours before the interruption, but we've gone now for an hour and a half without an interruption. I'm gonna just like save my luck. Um, so thanks for showing up, Akatsuki Merchant, and I'll do another stream on Saturday. So I appreciate your appearance and have a good rest of your afternoon or I guess evening.